Hey, if you like some of my NBA discussions here, make sure to subscribe to my other channel, which is original NBA content, which I post every week about different NBA topics. And yeah, it's a new channel, so make sure to support it. And yeah, hope you enjoy. Hi, my name is Lyric, and today we're going to be back to the top 10 greatest defenders of all time by the man, the myth, the legend, Jonny Arnett, one of my biggest inspirations on YouTube. Inspired me to make my original channel, link at the top description below. But, yeah, okay, top 10 greatest defenders of all time. Okay, I'm going to state my opinion right now. I think Bill Russell is the greatest defender of all time, followed by Hakeem Olajuwon. I don't know how I would have to really think about it to make the rest of this list, and I make a list like this for my original channel eventually. Once I really dive into it, but I know those are my top two, 100%. Bill Russell, if the DPOY existed, he would have won like 10 straight. Many of the years where the Celtics won the championship, they were the worst offensive team in the league. But they were able to win the championship because Bill Russell catered a defense that was so good. They were able to win a championship despite being the worst offense in the entire league, which is also why I don't agree with the thing that, oh, Bill Russell was on a super team. Oh, yeah, real big super team that was the worst offense in the entire NBA, right? That's why I don't agree with that take. That take. But and then Hakeem Olajuwon, I think, is a clear second because, I mean, his steals and blocks numbers are so insane. I mean, the guy, I think one season averaged like 3 steals and 3 blocks a game, or damn close to it. Let me grab some here. Yeah, it's insane. I mean, you just look at some of his games where he like got near quadruple doubles, or even he got some games where you can't near quintuple doubles. He's the best stealing center of all time. Like the amount of steals he got as a center is actually insane. Yeah. We might see guys like Ben Wallace in here, Dikembe Mutombo. Those who have the record tied for the most DPOYs ever with 4 each. We might see a guy, maybe we'll put Wilt in here. Though we don't have a lot of things about him. We know he blocked a fuck ton of shots. You know, a Mark Eaton, 6 blocks a game, and we'll also get perimeter guys, like Gary Payton maybe. Maybe a Drew Holiday, really, for pushing it. Michael Jordan, maybe. But yeah, let's see who it is. Top 10 greatest defenders of all time. Comment below if you agree or disagree with Johnny's list, and we're going to go into it. Iconic intro here with Kobe. I don't think Kobe's going to make top 10 defenders, so shouldn't make top 10 defenders of all time, despite how many all-defection selections he made. Draymond, maybe? Some people would say Draymond. I mean, he's one of the smartest defenders of all time, and I think he's possibly the best defender nowadays.
Than not, it's
so I wouldn't be mad at Draymond, actually.
Awards and who get all of the attention. But make no mistake, the defensive end of the court deserves more credit, as it's literally half of the game. Today,
Damn right.
I'm breaking down my list of the top 10 greatest defensive players in NBA history. And let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with these choices. Before I get into it, let me first explain how my list works. Although defensive accolades are important, they are not the only major factor, as they're given based on the media members voting.
Which makes sense. That should be the thing for all-time listings. Like, accolades, I think, are very important, but they should never be your all-end-all, But they do heavily help. Like, if people thought you were the DPOI for 4 years, I think that really helps your case. But it should not be end all be all. Like, that doesn't mean Ben Wallace and Dikembe Mutombo are the 2 greatest defenders of all time. It just means there's 2 of the greatest defenders of all time.
Which I might not necessarily agree with. The defensive awards also have a lot to do with who they were up against. So obviously, if the competition was stronger, then it's harder to win.
Which is why also Hakeem is at second, because he did all his amazing defensive work against possibly the greatest era centers of all time, going against David Robinson, Shaq, Patrick Ewing,
The award on a yearly basis. And lastly, this list is a combination of peak defensive abilities.
Dwight Howard won 3 straight DPOIs, so maybe him.
For example, a player like peak defensive abilities and longevity.
Okay, also including longevity.
For example, a player like Mark Eaton was one of the greatest rim protectors in his prime, but he had a relatively shorter career. When you compare his 10 seasons...
Oh, Tim Duncan. Of course, Tim Duncan's got to be in here. So, yeah, it makes sense why Mark Eaton was not going to be in here.
...of elite defense to...
Because he wasn't, like, elite defensively for such a long time.
19, well, then it's...
He's like the Tracy McGrady of, defense.
Obvious who's making the list and who isn't. So without further ado, let's get into it. Number 10, Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan, top 10 defender all time.
Only guard.
It makes sense. In his peak seasons, he was averaging 3 steals and 2 blocks a game, which is actually insane. Won DPOY, made a fuck ton of all defensive first teams. He's probably the best defensive guard of his era, plus potentially of all time, maybe. I think it's arguable. Yeah.
To make my list,
I agree with this
which
one.
really tells you just how difficult it is for a perimeter defender to stand out amongst the crowd.
Right.
MJ deserves the spot.
Interior defenders are inherently better, more valuable than perimeter defenders, I think, in my opinion, because they have to guard the paint regardless of who's in the paint, you know? Like, a perimeter defender doesn't have to guard a big guy, you know, from the outside. He only has to guard the guys from the outside and maybe the smaller guys inside. He's not really asked that much to guard the big guys. But if you're an interior defender, you have to guard, one, the big guys, and also the perimeter guy. If your perimeter defender fucks up and gets to the basket, you also have to defend the perimeter guy going at the basket. So, you know, partly why fucking those Jazz teams back in the day when Rudy Gobert was winning all those DPOYs, you know. You know, Rudy Gobert, people always clowned on him, but it wasn't his fault, man. His perimeter defense was so trash, he had to do fucking everything on defense.
Spot, though, as he was an
So eventually he had prone to have games where he would just get embarrassed because he couldn't fucking do everything out there.
absolute menace to opposing guards. He was first team all-defense a total of 9 times,
Nuts.
which is tied for the most in NBA history. Among guards, he has the highest blocks per game average in NBA history, and he's currently 4th on the all-time list in total steals, regardless of
100%,
the fact that he
100%.
played fewer seasons than most of the players in the top 25. At his best,
That is true.
he won the Defensive Player of the Year in 1998.
Yeah, 3 steals and
where
2
he
blocks.
averaged 3.2
Nuts.
steals and 1.6
Obviously,
blocks,
more defense than
which
steals
made
and
him
blocks,
first
but, you know.
overall in steals per game and first among guards in blocks per game. Number 9.
If Michael Jordan accolades were just his defensive accolades, I think he'd still be a Hall of Famer, which is nuts.
Ben Wallace.
Ben Wallace, 100% agree, 4-time DPOY. I think he was the best player on the 04 Pistons, straight up. I think he was the best player on the 04 Pistons. And for you to be a guy that, like, really, he couldn't play offense. He was legitimately, like, damn near only a defensive player, and he was the best player on a championship team. 100% deserves to be in here.
His
100%.
longevity may have not been enough to get him in the top 5, but his peak was certainly
Yeah, didn't have
enough
much
to get
longevity.
him in the
His, like, 5-year peak
top
was nuts,
10.
though.
This 6'9 center / power forward was one of the strongest players to ever do it, and he was one of the few men
Yeah,
who
put Shaq
could
in his
actually
ass.
do a decent job of containing a prime Shaquille O'Neal.
Yeah, him
His
and Rodman
best
also
years
did that.
were on the suffocating Detroit Pistons of the mid-2000s.
I think Rodman might be the third. I might be Russell Hakeem than Rodman, you know. I mean, Rodman was 6'7", the greatest rebounder of all time, which is a part of defense because, you know, a defensive possession is not concluded unless you've gotten the rebound. I mean, he's just so versatile. He could guard 1 through 5. He won multiple championships. I mean, he had decent longevity, too. I think Rodman probably should be, like, arguably third. I mean, the guy held Shaq at 6'7", and could also guard Magic, you know.
And it was during this stretch that he won the Defensive Player of the Year award 4 times in a span of 5 seasons.
That's defensive dominance right there.
Regardless of the fact that he was relatively undersized as a center, he was still
shorter
able
center.
to be a solid shot blocker, leading the league overall in the 2002 season. He was also solid at stripping the ball from the opponent.
He has more, I think he has, the stat, I think he has more blocks than fouls and more steals than turnovers. I'm pretty sure that's true. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's a true stat that I've heard before. Pretty sure in a Jonny Arnett video, so.
As he averaged 1.3 steals over the course of his career.
That was a good amount for a center.
In total, he made 6 all-defense teams, which is actually the fewest of all eligible players on my list.
For him only like 6 all-defense teams, but be a 4-time DPOY, it actually shows how crazy his peak was, but he didn't have that much longevity.
And as I mentioned before, that was a product of his lack of elite longevity. But when
Right.
he was at his best, there are very few defenders more intimidating than Wallace. Number 8, Scottie Pippen.
Pippen makes sense. Yeah, Pippen was probably a better defender than Jordan. Yeah, because he was like the number 1 on defense. He had that number 1 defense, number 2 offense role, and Jordan was the number 1 offense, number 2 on defense. So I do agree, Pippen was probably a better defender than Jordan, despite the fact he never won the DPOY, which is crazy how you can be a top 10 defender of all time and never win the DPOY. It's just crazy. It's because scenarios happen, you know. But yeah, him, Jordan, and Rodman led the greatest defense of all time in '96. So, yeah.
Although
I mean, they had 3 top 10 defenders of all time on one team. Even if they all weren't in their defensive prime, it's still nuts. And they had Ron Harper, also a good defender at the one.
Jordan may have averaged slightly more steals and more blocks, there was no question that Pippen was the most smothering on-ball defender for their 6
Yeah, he was the one mostly guarding their best player.
championship runs.
From what I've seen.
Somehow, Scotty never won the Defensive Player of the Year award, which was probably a product of there being so many all-time great defensive centers in his era. But Pippen was the runner-up to Dikembe Mutombo in 1995 and to Gary Payton in 1996. In the totality of his career, Pippen made 10 all-defense teams, and 8 of those selections were first team.
Just one less than Jordan.
For the 5th most in NBA history. Within his complete body of work were some key moments where Pippen displayed his abilities, like when he
Magic
took on
in
the
91.
assignment of defending and containing Magic Johnson in the 1991 NBA Finals. Number 7, Tim Duncan.
100%. Tim Duncan, defense was his main thing. He had probably the most longevity of anyone here, has to be. 19 seasons. He was always defensively consistent. Won 5 championships while being a mostly defensive player. You know, I mean, he could definitely do some offense in his prime. You know, like 2003 and shit. But like, you know, his defense was always his main thing. And also somehow never won DPOI. Nuts.
Just like Pippen, Duncan never won the Defensive Player of the Year award, as he never led the league in steals or blocks. And with Bruce Bowen on his team for some years...
Yeah, they normally go with the more stats guy. The DPOI. They normally go with some guy who either led the league in blocks or steals. They never go with a guy who's just, like, really good at defense, you know. They rarely do that, you know.
Years, you could even argue that there were stretches where he wasn't even the best defensive player on his team. But for what Duncan lacked in peak performance, he made up for it with his insane longevity and consistency. For his
100%.
career, Duncan earned a whopping total of 15
all-time
selections in his 19 years of pro basketball. That's easily the most selections in NBA history.
Bro, 15 all-defensive selections. Bro. Most players don't even play 15 years.
Many players enjoy being an elite defender in their 20s, but Duncan carried that tremendous impact
in his 30s
into
and
his
everything.
late 30s, as his intelligence and rim protection was a pivotal aspect.
I would say he was still the best player because of what he bought on defense, and he was still like a pivotal offensive player in the system. I say he was still the best player on the Spurs in 2014 when they won that last championship there, which in my opinion was their best Spurs team and one of the best teams of all time.
Of their final championship
blowing out the Heat with LeCramp.
Number 6, Kevin Garnett.
Garnett better defensively than Duncan? Interesting. I did see the Greatest Peaks video, and that really showcased me how good his defense was. Garnett. I mean, he showed like he was so great at his peak. Because the defense was his main thing. He wasn't the best offensive player. I mean, he was a decent offensive player, but I think at his prime, he was the best player in the world, at least for like 1 year, while being a mainly defensive guy. And, you know, he did win a DPOI when he went to the Celtics, when he could more focus on just defense and not having to carry the offense all the time like he had to do with the Wolves. He had to carry both the offense and the defense. I don't know if I'd put him as better defensively than Duncan. I'm not mad at it, though. I'm not mad at him being people calling Garnett better defensively than Duncan. Not mad at it.
Especially during his time in Minnesota, the big ticket was a nightmare for opposing teams, as he was always bringing the energy and intensity on defense. Like the legendary Hakeem Olajuwon, Garnett was usually among the league leaders in blocks and steals simultaneously.
Yeah, he had a great combination of doing the blocks and steals.
For many years, his elite defense appeared to go
He had multiple seasons averaging 2 steals and 2 blocks.
unnoticed. But in his first season as a member of the contending Boston Celtics, he was rewarded with the Defensive Player of the Year.
Right.
In total, he made 12 all-defense teams, which is tied for the second most of all time, and 9 of those were first team, which is tied with Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, and Gary Payton for the most of all time. Add in the...
And for a forward to do that, too, not a guard, because the guard have it easier because there's less defensively elite guards in the league, so it's easier to make all defensive first team as a guard than it is as a forward or a center, especially as a center, but, you know, him as a forward, it's even harder, so that really shows.
That he shut the Lakers down in the paint during the 2008 championship run, and I'm very comfortable having Garnett just outside my top 5. Number 5, David
Robinson. I'm not mad at this at all, actually, because I was looking at some of his stats, you know, for a video I'm doing, and, bro, some of his stats, bro. Oh, my God, bro. He had a season where he averaged, I think, 2 steals and 5 blocks a game? Oh my god, he had a quadruple double. I mean, yeah, his shot blocking is absolutely insane in the paint. I mean, he's probably the second best defensive center of his era. Yeah, and the second best defensive player of his era too.
Robinson.
So yeah, I would agree with
Before
this.
the big fundamental was locking down the paint for San Antonio, the Admiral was doing it at a higher level. Over a 6-season stretch from 1990 to 1996, Robinson was averaging a monstrous
4 blocks a game for 5 years straight is nuts.
3.6 blocks per game. All-time great rim protectors like Tim 3.6 blocks per game. All-time great rim protectors like Tim Duncan and Dwight Howard never had a single season where they averaged that many blocks per game.
Nuts.
Robinson did it
for
over
5
a
years.
6-year stretch.
6 years.
He was also
Damn.
regularly among the league
Look at his
leaders
arms,
in
goddamn.
steals per game.
One of the most
regardless
athletic
of
players.
The fact that he played at the center position, and he
Yeah.
got as high as 2.3
2 steals as a center while averaging 4 blocks.
which was 5th in the league overall.
Yeah, he
was
won
the
1
Defensive
DPOY.
Player of the Year in 1992, and he earned a total of 8 All-Defense teams. Due to his service in the U.S. Navy, Robinson didn't debut in his rookie season until the age of 24. And if he had gotten
shame.
an earlier start to his career, like many players do, then he would likely have even more defensive accolades than he already does. Number 4, Wilt Chamberlain. He's most famous.
Wilt, top 5 defender. I mean, his blocks numbers are insane because they haven't calculated them because blocks were not a stat when Wilt played. But there was games where one of the most respected NBA stat keepers actually did keep track of the blocks, not officially, but he just kept track of them, just to keep track of them. And also with games that were filmed. I mean, there's a game. I know there is a game on Christmas that is in full on video where he blocked 23 shots, which is, I mean, that's nuts. I mean, I'm not mad at him as a top 5 defender when he is legitimate, when he might be the greatest, just pure shot blocker of all time.
For his
Not mad at it at all.
accomplishments on offense, but Wilt was
I think he averaged 9 blocks a game in the games that we have officially tracked as blocks.
arguably just as dominant
Which
on
is
the defensive
nuts.
end of the court.
Bro, averaged a triple-double
Since
with blocks.
and steals were not officially tracked
Also had the quintuple double, 53 points, 32 rebounds, 14 assists, 24 blocks, and 11 steals.
until 1973.
And I mean, that's not
it's
defense, I don't know what
basically
is.
impossible to accurately estimate his defensive numbers over the entirety
Right,
of
it's hard to
his
calculate.
career.
Hard
With
to calculate.
That being said, Wilt's blocks were unofficially tracked over a 112-game span, and he averaged
9 blocks a game.
8.8 blocks over that stretch. Obviously, blocked shots are difficult to compare across eras.
Right, there was a faster pace and lower field goal percentage in this era, to be fair, but even
Considering
so,
numerous
there's no way you can minimize 9 blocks a game.
variables, like how the three-point line didn't exist yet. But regardless,
Also that,
it's
yeah, it
still
makes sense.
insanely impressive no matter how you
Still.
slice it.
Yeah.
There are many
And doing this while also having all your energy go to on offense, mainly 50 points a game on offense. Now also I'm doing that.
examples of Wilt controlling games defensively. Some may
Also paired on with his all-time great rebounding, averaging 27 rebounds a game. I'm guessing a lot of those being defensive. They didn't even calculate which ones are offensive versus defensive, but still.
say that he should be in the number 1 spot based on his insane numbers and reputation. But
Also blocked Kareem
I would
skyhook.
disagree.
Him and Hakeem, I think, are the only ones to block his skyhook.
Wilt also had a bit of a reputation for occasionally taking some nights off defensively. Nonetheless, I
okay.
certainly believe he deserves a spot in the top 5.
I'm not mad at it.
Number 3.
Rodman. I think he's going to have the same top 3 as me. Rodman, Hakeem, and then a Russell. I think he also will have Russell. I know he respects the older era, so I think he actually will have Russell number 1.
Rodman.
And I think there's no way he's leaving Hakeem out the top 10. Obviously, Hakeem's going to be number 2, so unless he has Hakeem number 1. He might, but yeah, I agree with the top 3 right here. Rodman.
The Worms
100%.
case defensively is a bit more complicated than some people may realize. Statistically, he was nothing to marvel at, as he has never had a single season where he averaged at least 1 block or 1 steal.
That's not what he was
What he
special
did
at,
well,
though.
was
On-ball
frustrate the
def-
offensive play.
The on-ball defense, all 5 positions is nuts, and it added to so many championship teams, and also paired on with being the greatest rebounder of all time. It's
with
nuts.
a smothering on-ball defense
And the hustle, too.
forced
Hustle also
him
adds
into
to it.
either a bad shot.
A lot of defense is just effort as well. That's why a lot of people, when you want someone who doesn't even play basketball, and then they're somehow like they're playing like they're somehow shutting you down sometimes because it's just a lot of basketball. You don't even have to know basketball, man. You just effort a lot of times. And Rodman had effort, to say the least.
I also believe that Rodman had the most versatile defensive career of all time.
Yeah.
At different points in
Guarded
history,
Magic to
he
Shaq.
was assigned to guard the best player from every position on the court. In
Yeah.
the 80s, he was asked to guard Magic Johnson at point guard, Michael Jordan at shooting guard, and Larry Bird at small forward. And then in the 90s,
That's nuts.
he
That's
was
a
asked
nuts.
to guard Karl Malone
That's a nuts 3 you have to guard.
at power forward and Shaquille O'Neal at center. And Rodman did more than an adequate job of all of those tasks. In his career, he made a total of 8 All-Defense teams, and he won the Defensive Player of the Year in back-to-back seasons as a member of the Bad Boy Pistons. Number 2, Hakeem Olajuwon.
Yeah, give me the same top
I said
3.
it once,
Hakeem.
I'll say it again.
100%.
The Dream was an absolute nightmare on defense, as he had the length, athleticism, and
Insane.
intelligence to be one of the select
His defensive stats make no
defenders
sense.
ever. Officially, he's the NBA's all-time leader in blocked shots, and
Right.
second place isn't even close. On top of that, he's currently 10th on the NBA's all-time list in total steals.
To be 10th all time in steals as a center is nuts. To not be a perimeter guy and you be 10th all time in steals,
Which is completely
absolutely
insane
insane.
for a center. The
Right.
closest center to Hakeem is David Robinson, who is
makes
54
sense.
spots below him on the all-time list.
Nah, that's actually an
Over
insane
his
ass stat.
career,
That's an
Hakeem
insane
made
ass
9
stat.
all-defense teams, and he won the Defensive Player of the Year twice. It is worth mentioning that he finished in the top 3 of the Defensive Player of the Year voting a whopping 6 times. A couple things that are rarely appreciated
But I should got robbed a few,
Hakeem
y'all think?
was his chase down speed and his lateral quickness, which helped him block and
Yeah,
contest
look at this.
many shots from
His-
speedy
dude,
guards
his
and
t-
wings. He was
He probably had the most fun to watch defensive highlights of all time.
truly the
pure
standard
defensive
of
highlights.
defensive excellence in the 1990s. Here is my list of
Honorable mentions: Dwight Howard, 3-time DPOY, Rudy Gobert, underrated at this point defensively. I think he arguably, I'm just saying, Rudy Gobert's arguably a Hall of Famer just because of his defensive accolades. I mean, he's a 3-time DPOY. Dikembe Mutombo actually didn't make it despite being a 4-time DPOY. It's actually surprising. George Mikan, I mean, for the time, yeah, because he was by far the best defensive player at this time because, you know, just how the game was played. Nate Thurmond, he had a quadruple-double, I know that. Kobe Bryant, all defensive selections. Kareem, all-time great shot blocker, you know, in longevity. Broke at Nate Thurmond twice. Michael Cooper, farly underrated, was the best defensive player on the Showtime Lakers. Sidney Moncrief, one of the best defensive guards, won the first 2 DPOYs. Gary Payton, obviously, potentially up there with Michael Jordan as the best defensive guard. Kawhi Leonard makes sense, 2-time DPOY, you know, great on-ball defender. Mark Eaton, as I said before, averaged 6 blocks a game at his peak. LeBron, one of the most versatile defenders of all time, can guard 1 through 5. Can play 1 through 5 too, but he also can guard 1 through 5. You know, Bruce Bowen was arguably better than Tim Duncan defensively at his peak when they were playing together. Obviously, didn't just have the longevity. Tony Allen, Kobe Bryant said that was his toughest defensive matchup. Alonzo Mourning, you know, won back-to-back DPOIs, one of the best, you know, shot blockers of the time. Patrick Ewing, you know, just another of those all-time great defensive centers of the same era. And Draymond Green, who I think has a decent case to make the list. You know, being the best defensive player in 4 championship teams, you know, carrying that defense, you know, DPOI, arguably the best defender of this era. I think he has a decent case to make the list. But, okay, let's go on to the number 1.
The video for a
I know who it is.
Should any of these players have made it into the top 10? Let me know below.
I think Draymond has the
Number
best
1,
case for those.
Bill Russell.
Yep,
Back when
100%.
Russell and
100%.
the Celtics dominated the NBA, the Defensive Player of the Year did not exist yet. So because of this, they often gave him the MVP award.
The 2 awards that Bill Russell would have really shown Bill Russell's dominance, the most of any other award, would have been DPOI and Finals MVP, because he was always the main guy in the championship team, and mainly because of his defense. But those 2 awards didn't exist. The 2 awards that would have mainly show how good he was did not exist at the time. He would have been like a 7. Bro, I think people would have respected Bill Russell a lot more, because a lot of people disrespect Bill Russell these days. People would have respected him a lot more if he was an 11-time champion, 7-time Finals MVP, 8-time DPOI, and 5-time MVP, which I think he should have been. and one of the greatest rebounders of all time. I think people would respect him a lot more if he got those Finals MVPs and DPOIs. And I feel people would have him unanimous top 5, which I do have him top 5.
Instead, Russell was a relentless competitor, and with his Olympian level
and better than
of
Wilt.
athleticism, he established himself as arguably the greatest rim protector in the history of the game. Just like Wilt Chamberlain, who I mentioned earlier, Bill Russell's blocks and steals were never officially tracked.
That's a
That
damn
doesn't
travesty.
entirely mean that we couldn't gauge his defensive impact. In 11 out of his 13 seasons in the NBA, Russell led the league in defensive win shares. That's more than doubled second place, which
He led the league in more defensive win shares more than Wilt Chamberlain led the league in scoring, which means that Bill Russell was better at defense than Wilt Chamberlain was at scoring, and Wilt Chamberlain was a 50-point per game scorer.
is George Mikan and Tim Duncan with 5. The Most Defensive Player of the Year awards by one player is a total of 4, which is an honor shared by Ben Wallace and Dikembe Mutombo. If that award had existed during Bill
It would have been
Russell's
close.
era,
Bill Russell
then
would have been like
would have at
10.
least doubled that total.
Right.
Bill Russell built a legacy for himself and won 11.
I feel like if he would have had those awards, he would have made people look dumb for not saying a guy that's an 11-time champion, 5-time MVP, 7-time Finals MVP, and 9-time DPOI, and second all-time in rebounds is not top 5. But unfortunately, two of those very, very important accolades don't exist for him.
Championships with defense as his greatest skill set.
Exactly.
In the same era that Wilt Chamberlain played in the NBA. If
Insane.
that isn't a strong case for being the greatest defender of all time, then I don't know what is.
I think he easily
So
takes
what do
it.
you guys think?
All right, so that was the list here. Comment below if you agree or disagree with this list, and what opinions did I say in this video that you would like to talk about more? Something that you don't particularly agree with, or something that you think, just something to say about your list particularly. I'd love to see your list in the comment section below. And yeah, I think that top 3 is pretty good, at least. The top 3 I think is set in stone. But yeah, maybe you guys disagree with that. And yeah, subscribe to my original channel. Top link in the description. And yeah, bye.